Thank you very much, Mr. President. We are in an age of tight budgets and of tough choices, and I rise today to introduce legislation that would address some loopholes in the tax codes which provide for super high income Americans ways to pay lower tax rates than are paid by regular, hardworking, middle-class families. These middle-class families feel that they are struggling to get by, and then they find out that some people with really extremely high incomes are actually paying a lower all-in federal tax rate than they are. That's, to them, just not common sense, and that's, I think, to all of us, just not common sense. Americans deserve a straight deal, and right now they are not getting one from our tax system. To see the unfairness of our current tax system, we don't have to look much farther than the national headlines. According to a Forbes magazine report last fall, billionaire Warren Buffett, and I quote, paid just 11.06% of his adjusted gross income in federal income taxes in 2010. Mr. Buffett is the first to express his dismay at this circumstance and acknowledges that the rate he pays is lower than the tax rate paid by his own secretary. Mr. Buffett has called for a correction of this anomaly, and I agree with him. And so does President Obama, who in his State of the Union address said that Washington should stop subsidizing millionaires. I agree. We should celebrate the success of people who are earning $1 million and more a year, but we really don't, particularly in this time of tight budgets and hard choices, need to subsidize that. The legislation that I've introduced today, the Paying a Fair Share Act of 2012, would ensure that those with extremely high incomes pay at least a minimum federal tax rate of 30%. I want to thank Senators Akaka, Begich, Leahy, Harkin, Blumenthal, and Sanders for being initial co-sponsors of this measure. The structure of our bill is pretty simple. If your total income, capital gains included, is over $1 million, you calculate your taxes under the regular system. If your effective tax rate turns out to be greater than 30%, you pay that rate. If, on the other hand, your effective tax rate is under 30%, like Warren Buffett's 11%, then you'd pay the fair share tax rate. After collecting input from some of my colleagues, I've also included a provision to allow the fair share tax to be gradually phased in for taxpayers earning between $1 and $2 million per year. Taxpayers earning less than $1 million, which is 99.9% of all Americans, wouldn't be affected by this bill at all. Taxpayers earning over $2 million would be subject to the 30% minimum federal tax rate, and those in between $1 million and $2 million would pay on a phased-in basis a portion of the extra tax required to get up to the 30% effective tax rate. This way, we make sure that no taxpayer faces a tax cliff where earning an additional dollar of income increases his or her taxes by more than $1. In his State of the Union address on Tuesday, President Obama called for legislation to ensure that the highest earning taxpayers pay at least a 30% tax rate. The Fair Share Act would do just that. To call our tax system fair, I believe the highest income Americans should pay a higher rate, not a lower one, than middle income taxpayers. For more context, let's take a look again, because I have given this speech over and over again on the floor, at how super high income taxpayers fare under our current system. This is the Helmsley building in New York, as I've pointed out before. It's on Park Avenue, and it has a unique characteristic, which is that it is so big, it has its own zip code. So because the Internal Revenue Service publishes information about tax payments by zip code, you can see what the tax payments are that come out of this building. And what we find out with the latest information that the IRS has published is that the average filer has an adjusted gross income of over $1 million in the Helmsley building, but the average tax payment out of that building is only 14.7%. To provide a little context for that, if you look at what the average New York City janitor or the average New York City security guard pays in terms of an effective all-in federal tax rate, it's 23.8% for the security guard and 24.9% for the janitor. So at this point, it looks like the people who are the very successful occupants of the Helmsley building pay an actual lower federal tax rate than the people who come in and clean the building. And that does not seem fair or sensible. And one might say, well, maybe it's just, something about the Helmsley building that causes it, but it's not, despite Leona Helmsley's infamous line that it's only the little people who pay the taxes. It's a broader issue than that. Take a look at the income tax information about the highest earning 400 Americans. In the same way that the IRS aggregates information by zip code, it also takes the 400 highest income earners and reports on them in aggregate. The 400 top incomes for 2008, which is the last year the IRS has assembled, they had an average income each of $270 million, which certainly is something to be proud of and to celebrate if you can achieve that kind of success. But the average tax rate paid by the 400 was only 18.2%, which is considerably apart from the discussions we've been having in the Senate about what the top income tax rate should be. We discuss often whether the top income tax rate should be 35% or should be 39.6%. It was 39.6%, for instance, during the booming Clinton economy. It's now 35%. Depending on where the tax cut discussion goes, it may go back up again. But that really is not what a large number of these very high income earners pay. In fact, the top 400 aren't anywhere near that. They're about half that at 18.2%. So we're supposed to have a graduated tax code with people who are progressively graduated, with people who earn more paying a higher rate. Let's see who else pays an 18.2% rate. We looked at Bureau of Labor Statistics information for a single filer earning $39,350. That's where you hit an 18.2% tax rate, just like the 400 who made $250 million each on average. They're in the same position as somebody who's earning a little less than $40,000, who pays 18.2% under our present system. And if you look at the type of jobs that hit that area, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, in the Rhode Island labor market, a truck driver earns on average $40,200. So you have a truck driver paying the same rate of federal tax as somebody earning $250 million in a year. So I think there's plenty of room for correction here and to bring our tax system in line to the principle that I think we all espouse theoretically, which is that it's a progressive tax system. And the more you earn, the more you pay, and indeed the higher a rate you're supposed to pay. It's not supposed to be the other way around, where at the really high extreme you end up paying lower rates than regular Americans. So the Helmsley building was one building that has a little story to tell all of us. Here's another building with a story to tell. This is a building that is called Whitehouse, and it is in the tax haven Cayman Islands. It doesn't look like much, does it? I don't want to say it's a crummy little building, but it certainly doesn't compare to a lot of other business buildings. But it does have something remarkable happening within it. It has 18,000 corporations that claim to be doing business out of this location. 18,000 corporations in this little 5-story building. It gives a new meaning to the phrase small business. Well, as our budget chairman, Kent Conrad, has pointed out, the only business going on in Whitehouse is funny business with our tax code. Shell companies that hide assets and dodge tax liabilities. Mr. President, it does not make sense that our tax system permits the highest income Americans to pay a lower tax rate than a truck driver pays, and it doesn't make sense that we allow Americans and American companies to, by the thousands, to hide income in offshore tax havens like this. If you look at the rates that are paid, Warren Buffett, 11.6%, the occupants of the Helmsley building on average, 14.7%, and the $400 billion a year earners on average, 18.2%. And you look at the fact that we have multi-trillion-dollar budget deficits, it means that the taxes they're not paying at the nominal 35% rate are taxes that somebody else ends up having to pay, either through deficit or through additional taxation. So this is why the Fair Share Act makes a lot of common sense. And I hope that senators on both sides of the aisle will take a good look at it. This bill would do a lot of good things. It would simplify taxes. There's no point chasing loopholes if you know you're going to have to pay the 30% minimum. It'll simplify that. It would discourage the exotic tax dodges that allow people to go down to 14% or whatever tax rates, because they know they're going to get caught at 30%, so why do the effort, and the exotic tax dodges will be discouraged. It will reduce the deficit. We don't have a number yet from the Joint Committee on Taxation, but the public reporting so far has suggested it's going to be in the $40 to $50 billion range per year. And of course, it will bring fairness as well as common sense to our tax system. It really makes no sense for somebody earning $80,000 or $100,000 or $120,000 a year to be paying a substantially higher tax rate than somebody earning $250 million a year. There are a lot of advantages that come with enormous income, and that's a great thing because America thrives on capitalism, and we all love success. We celebrate success in America. We provide an economy and a culture in which people can accomplish remarkable things and create enormous fortunes and become enormously successful, and that is part of what is good and what is right with America. They do it through hard work. They do it through being smarter than other people. They do it with a lot of good personal characteristics. But with all the advantages that do come with an enormous income, paying a lower tax rate than regular working families should not be one of those advantages. I hope we can get together to correct this, and I look forward to working with my colleagues on this issue, and I yield the floor. I thank you, Madam President.